Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In 1988, Colorado Senator Gary Hart was considered to be the frontrunner in the election against George H.W. Bush. But his campaign became marred in a sex scandal that the press couldn't get enough of and Hart couldn't put his family through. Director Jason Reitman and Hugh Jackman have taken the Hart story and drawn a very clear line between how covering politics was before Hart and how it's been since. They also made a really great film. Let's take a look at the frontrunner.
So start with the shoulder in a little. My name is Gary Hart, and I'm running for president.
I want you to think about the opportunity that we have right here, right now. I've never known a guy more talented at untangling politics so that anyone can understand. It is a gift, and he wants to share that. And all anybody wants is for him to take a stupid photo. He will never understand that.
Gary Hart is the man to beat in '88.
If we hold ourselves to those highest standards, then the voters cannot do otherwise.
Senator, I want to ask you some questions about the woman at your townhouse.
Can you tell us how you know her?
You can't be serious. No one is staying in my home. There's no need for that.
I am serious, sir.
Oh, Cinnamon, where you gonna run to?
The one thing I asked is that you don't embarrass me.
We can't hide from this.
Where you gonna run to?
The cameras go everywhere.
All on that day.
It's up to us to hold these guys accountable.
To the river.
Just because some other paper used gossip as front page news, I mean, that doesn't mean we have to.
It does. It does now.
Run to the sea.
He is a man with power, and that takes certain responsibility.
We need to say something.
It's nobody's business. None of it is.
Okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about how you get through today.
This campaign is about the future, not rumors, not sleaze, and I care about the sanctity of this process, whether you do or do not.
Go on, Gary. Say it.
There's going to be a story tomorrow about me.
Everybody, please welcome Josh Brener, Ari GRaynor, Sara Paxton, Mamoudou Athie, and Jason Reitman. From the frontrunner. Hey, guys. Thanks so much for being here. Congratulations. I loved the film. I truly loved the film. I think it's one of the best works of yours that I've seen in a long time. I mean, it might be my favorite.
I was here 5 months ago with Tully.
What if I like this more than Tully, and I liked Tully a lot?
No, you clearly
What if you're on a roll?
Toss Tully over the side of a cliff.
No, I really like Tully, but what if I like this more?
Interestingly enough, that is the artwork for this movie, going over a cliff, so it could have just been Tully.
Sure, that's been in the back of my head, and that's how it came out. When did you start writing this script? When did you see the Gary Hart story as something that you wanted to tap into that would have so many clear parallels to what we experience today?
It's interesting. You know, this started for me with a Radiolab episode that I listened to 3 years ago, pre-election. And I started working on this with Matt Bai, who's a New York Times Magazine writer, covered 5 presidencies, Jay Carson, who was the press secretary for Hillary Clinton, and Howard Dean. And we began writing this movie when we felt it was relevant. Now it's gotten too relevant. I'd be happy with less relevancy,
Why
frankly.
is that?
Well, because I'm like anybody else. I wake up in the morning these days, and I wake up, I look at my phone, and I go, oh, fuck.
Yeah. You want to smash the phone in your face. Like, no more of this, please. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not just relevant in the way that we talk about tabloids. It's now relevant in the way that we talk about sex and the way that we talk about power and sex. And these different ideas and waves of feminism kind of come colliding into this story in the same way that they did during the Clinton scandal with Monica Lewinsky. So you are tapping into a lot of things that are coming to the forefront. Once again, how do you do that without being heavy-handed? How do you do that without having a very clear message?
Well, I think, you know, Gary Hart is a really interesting pH test. And look, this is a story that has kind of largely been forgotten or misunderstood. You know, a guy went from being the next president of the United States, he was the front runner, and then a week later, he left politics forever. And at the center of this scandal is a private affair. And I think in that way, it's very different from Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. So it serves as this interesting test on, all right, here's someone who was prescient beyond all imagination, was Kennedy-esque, who had big ideas, who in the mid-'80s was saying things like, America is addicted to oil, that addiction is going to take us into the Middle East where we are going to encounter Islamic terrorism. We will not know how to fight it because we have a military that only knows how to bomb. He was prescient about the economy, about computing, Russia, the Middle East. And at the same time had this private affair. He met a woman at a party on a boat and invited her to his townhouse. And it really asks us, what is important? What is entertaining? What happens when tabloid journalism drives into the lane of political journalism?
Right. Sarah, you play Donna, the woman who he meets on the boat, and you have this performance that is sort of centered around watching your world sort of consistently get shattered by people who it's not clear whether they are trying to protect you or if they are trying to protect the senator. Can you talk about that performance and talk about Donna, what you knew about her?
Sure. I actually also listened to the Radio Lab episode before I got the script, so I was familiar with the story, even though I was being born when this was happening, so I don't have any actual memories or recollections. And when I got the script, I was really excited that I was going to be reading for Jason, but I was also really curious to see which version of Donna would be portrayed. I thought this could go a couple different, a few different ways. And I was so happy and so pleasantly surprised that this version of Donna was written with such respect and dignity, and she wasn't portrayed as this caricature, one-dimensional person as she had been 30 years ago. And so that was very exciting to me. And then, I was doing a lot of research, and there wasn't a whole lot actually about her out there that I could, find out, because both of, Donna and Gary never really spoke out about this. And this is pre, sort of internet. But I did find out that Donna was actually a really intelligent, highly educated, ambitious woman with agency, and she was not this caricature that was sort of, that she was portrayed as 30 years ago.
How important was it for you to have, because I do feel like both Gary and Donna and the reporters, everybody in this kind of walks a fine line of what they represent and what kind of composite they might be in terms of the ideas that they're trying to represent. How difficult is that for you and your writers to make sure that you never tip over the edge and they become too clearly one thing or the other?
I get frustrated by any filmmaker or film that tells me what to think. I think filmmakers should go into their work with questions. And what I found was when I would tell this story, when people would ask me what movie I'm making, and I would talk to them about the Gary Hart scandal, it affected everyone differently. Everyone had a different point of view, and we had this opportunity to have a film with 20 main characters. Each one was a route into the movie, and I've found that with audiences, it's very similar. I mean, audience members kind of hook their line to different members of this cast and find their way through. Kind
of why you open the movie the way that you do as well, through this, I would say, Altman-esque long shot covering this sort of the end of this campaign, or it's the end of the convention or the end of the campaign, excuse me, yeah. And you're seeing all these characters move in and out in these incredible zoom-ins and dollies, and you're establishing that this is going to be a sort of big cast of characters.
Yeah, and it's going to be conversation over conversation. Like if we're asking you as an audience to make a decision on what is important, we want to do that cinematically as well. So there's 3 conversations coming at you at once. There's 3 things to look at visually at once almost all the time, and you as an audience member have to actually make a decision of, okay, I'm going to follow that conversation, even though one can be about something important and one can be something completely innocuous.
Did you, when you read that, or when you wrote that, excuse me, did you think, okay, this is the chance to do something kind of like an Altman shot, or was it like, why not do an Altman shot here because it makes so much sense, or is that just in your DNA?
I'm obviously a fan of Altman. I'm a big fan of Michael Ritchie, who was the kind of the North Star for this film. It's this film, The Candidate, with Robert Redford, that served as the film that, I told everyone, you gotta watch this film because that is what we're trying to do here. But look, there's something about the way Altman would set up a scene in which you didn't know who the main character was. You didn't know what the dramatic thrust was. You were dropped in, and that's what we wanted the audience to feel like. Like you were dropped into the middle of the campaign, on the plane, on the bus, at the newspaper, and we're not telling you what to think, but rather presenting you with all this information about 1987, the scandal, and the points of view of journalists, campaign people, his family members, Donna Rice, each one kind of approaching this situation differently, so that as you walk out of this movie, there's going to be a real conversation.
Mamoudou, your character in some ways is along for the ride, but has clearly moral issues with the ride that you're being taken along with. In a lot of ways, I think you represent a lot of Americans who would find themselves in the midst of watching a scandal like that and wouldn't really know how to side. I don't necessarily care about this affair, but at the same time everybody else does. Maybe it does mean something and we have to follow up on this. Were you thinking about that? Was this character a composite, or were you thinking about how most Americans would be along for a ride like that?
No, I was thinking about how I would respond in a situation like that. No, it wasn't, because I think AJ, who is actually a composite, I think he takes his job very seriously, but I think he thinks of it more as a vocation than just an occupation. So he has a moral duty to do his job very well. And part of his job is to follow the trend of what's happening in the news. And this is what his editor is telling him to do, and this is his job as well. So, but he also has these feelings about this candidate. I decided that he was a huge fan of Gary Hart. And so, that's the moral impasse there. But that was my main, and I just kind of found myself, I think anybody looking at that kind of story can find themselves in that situation and oh, what to do? This is actually a very difficult decision.
It's a very distinct period of time in the sense where news begins to chase the other news that news is making, rather than editors sort of sitting around and saying, no, we can make the news by shaping these stories and covering the stories we think are important, instead sort of being dragged into all of this. Was that happening a lot before that, or do we really see that as the beginning of that with Gary Hart?
So, and Matt Bai, who wrote the book on this, does a really great job of setting the stage that within the mid-'80s, you have the invention of the satellite truck, which kind of helps create the 24-hour news cycle. In the '88 election, you have CNN giving satellite phones to their journalists for the first time so they can report news from anywhere. You have a current affair goes on television, which is the moment where tabloid goes from print to television. So you have all these things that are happening at once. And look, Ben Bradlee, who is a character in this, and obviously, is the editor of the Washington Post, said after the fact, in an interview with David Frost, he said, look, this is the moment where if everyone else is covering something, how do we not? And I relate it to today, the way, you wake up, you open up your news app, and then there's one article in the Post or the Times about the midterms or the Kavanaugh hearings, whatever. And then right next to it is another article, also in the Post or the Times, and it's about Ariana Grande and Pete Davidson breaking up. And
dude, too soon. I'm not ready to process that.
A fairly innocent example, I think, of the Caravan right now.
And they're given but they're given with similar weight as though they're both news, and it starts to confuse. Wait, is their separation news? And wait, is politics just entertainment? Are these just characters in a drama? Is this just real life Game of Thrones that we're being dragged through? And
it also works to legitimize stories that aren't necessarily important either. When one network or one outlet has to cover something because somebody else has put it forward in the news and said, this is important, suddenly you have the New York Times and the Washington Post saying that all these people are going to be coming up from South America, which is not a story.
Right.
So we're kind of left with a president who knows that if he throws out some sort of bile into the world, all of the mainstream sources are going to now feel like they have to cover it and legitimize it.
Although we were talking actually backstage about a mirror caravan of people coming to my native country of Canada.
Your movie.
No, I think if we, there could be a caravan of people trying to escape the U.S. Just a line of Teslas and Priuses moving up through San Francisco and Portland all the way up to Vancouver.
I'll be on that caravan. I'll be with you guys.
I'll vouch for you at the border.
Please do. Yeah. Please do. Ari, at the beginning of this conversation, I kind of referenced this wave of feminism, and there's a lot of talk at this time and then during the Clinton period of the sort of libertine feminists who believed that someone like Donna had agency in this, and it was okay. She wanted to sleep with a man that had power. She wanted to be a part of this. And then there are lots of women who say that they are who are feminists who also say, no, we still need to protect women from men of power who use their power to abuse. And it's kind of where your character is coming from in this, right?
I mean, I think she's coming from a multitude of places. I mean, I a character is Ann Devroy, who was the political editor of the Washington Post in 1987, who was one of the most well-respected political journalists, maybe of all time. She covered 4 different presidencies. She was incredibly well-respected in D.C. and I think around the nation. So I think that she's looking at it from, I think inherently when you're a woman, you are looking at that through a certain lens of experience, but she's looking at it through journalistic responsibility and integrity. And I think the question that comes up now, that comes up then, is when a personal action becomes emblematic of a bigger societal issue, and this line that is in the preview that's in the movie that I think is so brilliant is that, he is a man with power and opportunity, and that takes certain responsibility. And I don't know how much that's about a victimization of Donna specifically, as it is when you are a man or a person with power and opportunity, you gotta be responsible, whatever that means. And I just thought that was so brilliant when I read it in the script, because it made a question that can be so sweeping and huge and complicated, and whether it's about feminism or journalism or sexual politics or whatever, there's something very pure and simple about it. That's just simply, when you have power, you need to think about responsibility. And I think that's true in a multitude of places, certainly with sexual dynamics, but also in anywhere in our lives.
There's also this idea that she's not necessarily the only woman in this office, but we hear the men in this office talk about the sexual dynamics of men with power and women. We hear a story, I think, about it was about LBJ that Alfred Molina references. I think it's his character that references it, and says women just came in and out. We didn't say anything about it, but there's this one woman who's in the office who's like, yes, that is wrong, and that is why I may be here now to point that out and bring that up.
And that's where it becomes systemic issues, is that what starts as small, who cares, it's not a big deal, over time it creates an entire tapestry of trouble for women, like where we are now, what we're dealing with, and why those what seem like potentially small and personal examples build up over time. And I don't have a come down on a certain way of here's what I think about Gary Hart and what happened with him and Donna. I think it's a very complicated issue, but I do think that the movie really made me start thinking about in clear terms about responsibility that comes with whatever kind of power you have.
Josh, you and Alex Karpovsky kind of play the policy wonks of Gary Hart's campaign, who in every scene have just the look of being completely broadsided by this scandal that's unfolding around them. Can you talk about the character that you play?
One of the things that was incredibly special to me about this movie is that Gary Hart had surrounded himself by these incredibly bright, idealistic young people who have gone on to do incredible things for our country in public policy, in philanthropy. I mean, it's really like a murderer's row of people that have just done great things. I played Doug Wilson, who was a Pentagon official during the Obama administration. He was instrumental in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He received 3 distinguished public service medals. I mean, he's like a truly incredible individual. And in some ways, the movie represents, for me, sort of the path not chosen in our country, because Gary and the people around him did represent what could have been had we not chosen a different path. And Gary himself will say these things about Bush presidencies and the Iraq War and all of these things that this moment in time is more than just the moment we're looking at. It is so much greater.
And it's not just the path not chosen in regards to who became president. It's the path not chosen in terms of how we talk about presidents, how we talk about elected officials. So much. I mean, one of the things that Hugh Jackman says is Gary Hart, I think numerous times in the film, is why would anybody get into public life if this is the outcome? Which seems to be kind of the question that the movie's asking a few times as well.
I mean, we're in an interesting moment now, right? Where if you're someone who experiences shame, you drop out of the race. If you're someone who doesn't experience shame,
thrives off
my
shame.
God, yeah, you crush it. I mean, this is a system that favors the shameless. So look, I mean, this is a story that we remember for the joke about it. We remember as the name of a boat or a photograph or a line about follow me. And what we don't think about is this moment in which tabloid journalism and political journalism merged. And a wall went up between journalists and politicians, and these kind of healthy conversations about the gender politics, all these things that you're talking about, are at such a shrill level now in 2018, where you go on Twitter and you think your head's just going to get ripped off if you happen to say the wrong thing.
Oftentimes, like, no, I'm on the right side. I was just trying to ask.
I'm with you.
No,
I'm with you.
I'm sorry. You're right. I am sorry. I'll issue an apology.
Exactly. So this story from 1987 serves as this prism where you can dial the volume down from a 12 down to maybe like a 6.
What was the toughest part of making this film? Because one of the things that I was consistently blown away by was how you weave all of these conversations in and out of the film so beautifully. Like the pace of the film is really great in the way that you're following the scandal, but you're still able to consistently drop into another conversation or drop into another scene that maybe I had forgotten about was happening, but it was just, I thought it was really smart, really great.
That's kind. You know, I want to give a shout out to someone who never gets acknowledged, and that was our production sound mixer, Steve Mauro. So we had, we decided to do something on this film, and this is, I'm very grateful for our cast, because we said, all right, everyone's on set every day. That was kind of the rule. Everyone's going to come in, and we're miking everybody. And
there was an element of kind of figuring it out a little bit while shooting it.
If you don't have scripted dialogue, we're going to give you other pages. If you don't have that, we're going to give you a magazine to read with an article from '87. You're just going to talk. And our production sound mixer had everyone mic'd. Usually on a movie, you have a close-up of somebody, and you get their dialogue, and then you get the next person's dialogue. This is a movie where everyone's talking over each other, and our production mixer, Steve Mauro, who also did Star is Born and La La Land, literally is playing his mixer like a piano, every finger on a fader, and is directing your ears left and right and go, listen to a little bit of this, listen to a little of that. Oh, the camera's about to pan right. Let's start to hear the conversation that's over there. And
you catch anybody on a hot mic? I don't know what Jason is doing. This is way off.
But that was kind of the thrill of it, is you never knew what was going to cut through. And while on most movies, you go to a final mix many months down the line, and they're kind of bringing all these different takes together. When you go see this movie, you are hearing the work that he did on the day.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Right here. Hi, sir. Good walk up.
Hi, this question, I almost said Ivan. This question is for Jason, but really for everybody. No insult intended, obviously. Your father's a great director. How do you think things have changed since the scandal came about? I was alive when this happened, and it did, I think, affect things a lot. I don't see things changing as much. Obviously, internet was not around back then, or was around, but it wasn't in as widespread use. There was no use of smartphones. So do you think things have changed since then? And also, does this movie reflect that?
Well, things have clearly gotten better, right? I think we all kind of acknowledge this is a golden age. It'll be a happy time that people look back and go,
I feel safe.
I wish,
Every day I feel safe.
I wish life was more like 2018. It's like a small world.
If we end up saying that in 2024, we're like, I wish 2018 wasn't that bad.
God forbid. I mean, look, it's interesting. Prior to this moment, prior to the Hart scandal, candidates and journalists spent time together. They socialized. They went out to drink. They would go, to have dinner. And around that time, actually about 10 years earlier, the primary system came to effect. And when it did, the power of who picks candidates went from party bosses at conventions to the constituents. But we didn't know who all these people were. If you have 12 people running for, to be the Democratic nominee, and one's a mayor from some city, and another's a congressman from some state, and another's some governor, it's like, we don't know who they are. And if that power, that responsibility fell on the shoulders of journalists to figure out who these people were and tell us. And of course, once you ask for that, the question is, well, what do you want to know? And that's a tricky thing to answer. We're kind of still trying to figure that out today. Like, what do we want to know about these people? Like, what flaws are we willing to put up with? And during the scandal, a wall went up between journalists and candidates, where all of a sudden, all the journalists were getting were manicured, prepared statements, moments that are so supervised that they never feel natural. And because of that, the candidates don't seem natural. They only feel like we're just getting something that they've been working on for, months, as a quote. So that's one huge difference I see right now. Is I don't feel like I'm ever getting a natural moment, something just off the cuff.
Unless they're totally crazy and unhinged, then we're getting odd natural moments that we don't want.
Unless it's a tweet,
too
a
natural,
horrifying
too natural,
tweet.
Too natural. Yeah. Next question.
Hey, I'm really excited to see the film. what got me is like your passion for the project, and I wanted to ask for the actors, what were your experiences of just like diving into these characters and nuances that you all have felt, and also, you know, as a director too, like what else, like what things of nuanced ideas or things that you learned, since it's a historical piece too and a period piece?
I think that I'm speaking for all of us a little bit as actors when I say that playing real people is my first time playing a real person, Donna Rice, who's alive and who can, you know, watch the film and see everything that I'm saying about it. It's really intimidating, and it feels like a really big responsibility. I mean, I'm portraying this, you know, the darkest moment of her life, and that feels like a very big responsibility. So I think that was definitely the most challenging part for me.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about the day that we were shooting a scene, and when that a scene where that line about power and responsibility comes up, and there were some other incredible pieces of dialogue in that scene as well, and this lively debate that was happening, and the news about Harvey Weinstein had just hit. It had just hit, and so we were at the very beginning of this seismic cultural shift and conversation that now almost feels like we've been living in it for a long time because it's gotten so deeply ingrained, but it had just happened. And it felt so electric and emotional and deep and important and essential to be having these conversations where, even though they were happening in the newspaper and on Twitter, there is power in storytelling that is still unparalleled, I think, that you can tune out to rhetoric that you're reading, but that's why humanity and two people talking and having an emotional experience is so powerful. And I remember in that scene, I felt like, God, I gotta get this right, and if I don't say this, and I ended up, you know, like fighting tears at the end, being like, did we get it? Is it all right? Like, was the, you know, because it was so powerful to be able to actually have a conversation on screen that we were having in real life, and really sort of having it for the first time in this new way culturally.
Was it that specific scene that we had talked about before, the where you're talking about power and you're talking? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the day that you found that. Wow.
I think it had happened. It had happened like
around
a few weeks before or something. Like the news was still, you know, it was still coming. It was still coming to boil. Like you weren't quite sure sort of what was happening. And you know, and even just some of the lines that got cut out of the scene, I just remember saying, like, I just want to say the name Donna Rice. Like that's what I would like, is just say her name. You know, these things that I think were also felt so important and so vital important still, of acknowledge the woman. Acknowledge what you've done, which I think was part of what was so beautiful in the scene. That was also something that is still really coming up in a way that had not been articulated before.
I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, this one's for Jason. You said you first came up with the idea for the movie about 3 years ago, and so at that time it sounds like Trump, you know, may have been a candidate, but no one was taking that seriously. Did something like the E.T. Billy Bush tape, and that's in its influence on, or lack of influence on the election, did that influence you and how you approach this movie? I mean, it's something obviously that if that happened in 1988, it would have been far different. Did any of these things, or you mentioned that, you know, you wake up every morning, did that influence how you approach what's really a historical movie?
It's interesting. When I first heard the story, my first reaction was, wow, this is a thriller. This is a thriller that starts with someone being the next president of the United States, and less than a week later, he walks away from politics forever. Because he doesn't want to talk about his personal life. That was his thing. And somehow, no matter how pressed he was about everything else in the world, he could not see this thing that was happening right in front of him, that we wanted to know about the personal lives of our candidates. For the first time, it was important to us as a nation. And I think that's something that, pre this president, we were already kind of facing. What do we want to know about these people? How much do we care? If you have a heart surgery, you need to have heart surgery, do you care about your heart surgeon's marriage? Probably not. If it comes to a politician, maybe you do. If a politician is a womanizer, what does that say about how he sees women? So it felt like a a thoughtful and important conversation wrapped up in an entertaining thriller. And it answered, or at least spoke to some of the questions I had. And what happened was, as we began to make this movie, as you just mentioned, the world has been shifting under our feet. Like, no one could have presumed where we just landed over the last 2 years between this president, between the relationship with candidates in the media, and particularly the Me Too movement. So I think what's kind of astonished us all is how much the world has been shifting. And look, when you make a good movie, the movie screen becomes a mirror, and you see yourself in it. And at that point, the movie can hopefully become timeless because it will always shift and reflect the kind of conversations that we're having. So our greatest hope is that, yeah, it reflects all the things that you just brought up, and it'll continue to reflect as the world changes.
I think that's a great way to put it. It does reflect where we are right now, but it will reflect another place we are in 10 years because it never feels stuck in the very specific conversations that we're having right now. It doesn't feel stuck in that. It feels broad enough to carry sexual dynamics, politics for years to come. I love the film. Congratulations. It opens on Election Day. Can we just say, like, go vote, then go see the movie, or go see the movie, then go vote?
No. See the movie later. Just vote. Just
yeah,
vote.
please.
The movie will be
Please,
there.
dear God, vote. Come on.
Yeah, we need that first.
If you text Frontrunner to 26797, you can find out information on your polling place and get tickets to the movie.
Oh, that is amazing. And the
So,
movie's great.
there you go.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank
I
you.
really loved it. And give them a big round of applause.
Thank you very much.